Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl, and this is part one of what I read for middle grade March. I am reading way more than I expected to in March, and so I decided to break up this video into two parts. I will either film it in two parts and put it in one, or film it in two parts and post it in two parts. But this is going to be what I've read between March 1st and March 20th. There are two that are not middle grade and the rest are middle grade. Krista at Books and Jams, she's talked about trying to read a book a day in middle grade March. And I have never done that before, but I've come close to it because middle grades are usually so much shorter and easier to read fast. But this year I decided I was going to actually try because I have so many middle grades I wanted to read and I keep adding to the pile. And I've actually come very close. I don't think I'm going to have read 31 books by the 31st of this month, but it'll probably be close. I am kind of astonished at how many books I've read so far this month. I did have Read Across America Day. I did take that as having a readathon with my daughter as part of our school. And then every day that I have been able to and every evening I've been able to, I have been reading, doing that instead of other things more often this month than I normally do. With that said, I looked at the pile of books that I've read so far and thought I am going to have the longest video if I wait until the very end of the month to film this. I'm going to be talking about them in order of how I read them. Actually, I think I am going to do the two that are not middle grade first. I read Meet Me in Monaco by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. This was for my Inklings book club with my mom. This was the book that she picked for March. So this tells the story of a woman who owns a perfume store in France and a man who is from England and is a reporter. And they meet because of Grace Kelly. So this book goes into a lot of information about Grace Kelly and her wedding. They are both working with her and it tells their love story. This was a little bit hard for me to rate and to kind of decide what I felt about it when I was done with it, because I really enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the story. I loved the parts about the perfume. I love perfume, and I would love to someday go to one of these places where they, take your personality and your likes and dislikes and match you up to a scent that is just for you. I think that would be really cool to see what it would be and how that would turn out. And that is what she does for Grace Kelly. And it's what, she does as a business. She's creating fragrances. And I think that part was really cool. I also really liked James, the reporter in it. I liked his personality. I thought that they were really good together. I wanted them to be together. And of course the writing was good because it always is good with these two authors. And so I really enjoyed the reading process. I really enjoyed the story as a whole. I love Grace Kelly, so it was fun to read about her. But there were a few things I had a problem with in the book that I think that any of you watching would want to know about. Especially because I know that there are a lot of you who will not read a book if there is any kind of infidelity in it. There is infidelity in this book. And so I definitely wanted you to know that that was in this book. That was my problem with the book. I felt like the woman's father was having an affair for I don't know how long. I don't know how much of his life he was having an affair. The woman that he was having an affair with is presented as this really great woman, and his wife was presented as this really horrible woman. And it seems like nobody really has a problem with the fact that he had an affair. That bothered me because I felt like, okay, if he did, let's see that it's a little bit more of a negative thing rather than being glad that he had someone to love in the way that he loved her, because he didn't have that with his wife. I wish he would have divorced his wife and then been with the woman who he loved. But then also the daughter, the main girl in this, she also has a boyfriend when she starts falling in love with James. And that would be okay for me. That is not a deal breaker for me if the person breaks up with the boyfriend before they do anything physical, but she did not. And so that bothered me. I hated her boyfriend. And again, I felt like that with both of the instances of infidelity in this book, they did the same thing, where the person that was being cheated on is horrible and the person that's being cheated with is great. So you would cheer for it. And I do think that that's something that was a weakness of the book, because they should have broken up with the people before they went on to the next person. It's the only thing that really took me out of the story and made it harder to be as enjoyable as it could have been. But I really did still enjoy the book as a whole. And I think that it will be an interesting book to talk to my mom about at book club. And the other non-middle grade I finished in March was The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry J. M. Newen. I started this in February with Lent, and I just finished it a few days ago. This told the story of Henry seeing the painting by Rembrandt of the Prodigal Son in someone's office, and it just had this instant, deep meaning for him. And he then went through the story of the prodigal son using this painting and his own life story. There were times when I wasn't quite on board with some of the things he felt and thought, as far as like, I didn't agree with him. I'm not saying he shouldn't have felt those things. I loved the twist of looking at it through that lens, of looking through the story from this painting and the things that he brought out. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed it, and it wasn't very long. And it made me think about things more, and it made me notice things in the painting too. So now on to the middle grade I've read so far. The first middle grade I read was The Princess Swap. This is by Kim Bussing, and it's Cinderella and the Beast and Beauty and the Glass Slipper. So in this story, it is Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and it is Cinderella, obviously, and they switch places. I don't want to give away the story, but one of them does something that makes them switch places. So they both have a goal in mind of something they want to do, and they have to try to figure out a way to do it in order to get back to the life that they want. I thought this was a fun book, and I think that a lot of middle graders would enjoy it, and I didn't hate it. However, it was first person present tense, which I hate. There are very few books that I can read written in present tense and still like them. I just find that writing style is so choppy. If I like a book that is written in present tense, then you know that person is a good author, because like one of the best authors, because I just really hate it. And so that took me out of this. It made it feel more immature and choppy in its writing, I think, even though I still liked the idea and I do think she is a good writer. It couldn't take me out of that writing style the way some other books can. There were parts I really liked. There was one quote I wrote down, "One friend can remake the world." I liked that. The other big problem I had with it, I'm not sure if I should say, because it would be a spoiler. Let's just say that one character was gender swapped when the other ones weren't. It wasn't a romantic relationship. It didn't affect anything like that, but it was, to me, it felt like a very weird change. I'm going to put this book down and I'm going to say what it is. And if you don't want to be spoiled, then skip ahead to where I have the book back up. The Beast and Belle, their relationship is a friendship, not a romance in this. They become friends. But the Beast is a girl. And I felt like that was so unnecessary and weird because nobody else was changed. And it didn't make sense to me in the context of the story either. Okay, spoiler over. The next one I read was the group read for middle grade March. This is Max and the House of Spies by Adam Gidwitz. I have a lot of opinions about this book, and I'm not sure that they're popular opinions. But we'll see. Well, I'll have to wait until the end of the month and see what most of the people are saying about it when they do the live show where they're talking about it. I didn't have a problem with the writing in this book. I thought he was a good writer. I liked some of the characters. I felt like the story was interesting and important because I did not know that, I mean, I might have heard that Jewish children were taken from Germany and brought to England to get them out. But if I have ever heard that, I didn't remember it. And so I really loved having a book that was about that, where it's not just the British kids being taken out of the cities, but it's German Jewish kids being brought out of Germany. I thought that was a great thing to learn about, and I think it could have been an amazing story based on that alone. However, he's got these little guys on his shoulder. They're apparently German and Jewish folklore or myths or something. I can't remember the exact words of what they were called, and I'm not going to look it up right now. Sorry. You can look at my TBR. I said it in that one. But they are on his shoulders all of the time, and they feel so pointless. It's just like they're making little jokes here and there. There are a couple of times that they help him. I think there was twice in the book that they helped him. And so I thought, oh, okay, that's why they're here. But at the same time, I almost feel like it would have been stronger if he had figured out a way for Max to get out of that situation or learn the information in a different way rather than having these guys. I felt like they were pointless. I didn't like them. It also, the one that was the Jewish one, I think it was the one that was the Jewish one. I might be getting that backwards, but one of them was considered an evil thing in their mythology. At least that's what it said in the book. So I thought that was a weird thing too. My second problem with this is that everyone he met in England, with the exception of a couple of people, were either all out mean, super just prejudiced against him, treated him terribly and all the other Jewish people terribly, or they were nice to them, but then said really mean things about Jewish people. I got only partway in before I was like, okay, wait, are there any British people who are going to be good people in this book that are not Jewish? Only the Jewish people are being shown as these great, wonderful, nice people. But all of the other British people are not. There's the Rothschild in it. There was just so much where I thought, okay, you are not just telling history. It felt almost like revisionist history or like propaganda, where it was like the Jewish people here are the only good people. They're the only nice people. They're the only non-prejudiced people. Everybody else is prejudiced. And I am certain that Jewish children from Germany had prejudice against them by students that they went to school with, probably families they stayed with, people they met. I'm sure that happened. But when it's everybody, then it made me stop and be like, okay, that can't be. It can't be everyone. So then I feel like that takes away from it a little bit. Instead of showing the people that were like that, and the people that were thinking that they were nice but still were mean. I don't know. I just felt like it took away from the story a little bit. And then there was also a guy that worked in a very high, important position in security who tells Max that he hated the British. They knew that he had been in an uprising against their government and all these different things. And the only reason he came there and worked there was because he followed his girlfriend or something like that. And I thought, there is no way a man who is openly against a government is going to be hired for that level of security. So unbelievable. And I felt like Max was unbelievable as a spy. There were a couple of really good parts, a couple of funny parts, but I just felt like I've read the City Spy books, and in fact, I'm going to get to one in a minute. And in that, there's also children that are spies, and yet somehow I can suspend my disbelief and believe in them as spies. I could not believe in Max as one. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. Even though, like I said, there were a couple parts that I thought were clever, and I thought it was well written in general. I just didn't like it. And at the end was very abrupt because it is a cliffhanger for the next book. I've heard the next book is better, but I'm not even interested in finding out his story. I think he's going to go, and I think he's going to do a lot of stupid things, and there's going to be a lot of consequences, and then it will end up good. So yeah, not a fan. So I'm sorry if you're one of the people that loves it. It seems like I've heard more people that liked it than didn't. So, all right. And like I said, I read City Spies as well. So the new City Spies book came out, book 7, Europa, and I absolutely loved it. I love James Honti's writing. I have liked every book I've read by him so far. I love the kids in this book. I love the adults in this book. I love the way they all work together. I love the different personalities. I feel like he does a really good job of making each one of them very different with individual strengths and weaknesses, but make them all work together as a family. And the love and the friendship is it's just so well done. It's so well done. I think that they're completely wholesome, but exciting and well written. I cannot say enough about this series. I know that there's a lot of people that aren't going to like them, maybe because they don't like spy books or adventure books or middle grade. But if you like middle grade and you like spy books, I think you would love them. I've loved them. My oldest daughter is reading this now. It's one of my favorite series. Then I read the Heidi graphic novel, and I loved this too. I don't know that you would get the whole story if you don't know the whole story just from reading this. It is a very simplified version. It's an overview. It kind of felt like I was up here looking down at Heidi and seeing parts of it, but not getting everything. And I loved Heidi as a child. I dressed up as Heidi once, I think it was 4th grade? Yeah, 4th grade. I dressed up as Heidi for Halloween, and I was so upset that nobody knew who I was. I have ancestors from Germany, so I had the real dress and everything that had been passed down, and I was able to wear that. But nobody knew who I was, even when I said I was Heidi, and I was so upset. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that nobody knew who I was. So I feel like people should read the full Heidi. But if they don't want to, or if you have and you want a shorter version, this is a really good one, and the artwork was beautiful. I really loved the art in it. I felt like it was so well done, and it really captured the spirit of Heidi. Then I read Fault Lines. This is book 2 in the Winterton Deception. This is by Janet Sumner Johnson. This is a book series that I picked up the first one on a whim last summer and then loved it. And I've talked about it on here before. It's a family that goes to the spelling bee, and it was exciting and fun, even though it's a spelling bee. This is book 2. So we're getting back with all the same people. And I actually think I liked this even better than the first one. It had a lot of codes and puzzle type things in it, and I thought that was really fun. And I felt like it was exciting, and there were higher stakes in this one, even than in the first one. And the first one had some high stakes, but this one, it felt like it was even more so. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thoroughly loved reading this thing. There was one quote I wrote down from it. It's so simple, it's hard, because I think that's true. I think we can all relate to that. One of the other middle grade authors I've recently discovered, probably over the last 6 months to a year, is Darren R. Hicks. And so I read one of his new books, The Dark Skies Mystery, a World War II thriller. This takes place obviously during World War II, but it's in Asheville, and it takes place near the Biltmore. And it was really funny because I didn't know that. I didn't realize that going in, and I'm going to be visiting the Biltmore for the first time this year. I think Asheville for the first time. I don't know if I've ever been there. And so I I was very invested in that once I realized that's where he was at and that the Biltmore played a part in it. And I learned something about the Biltmore that I didn't know, about art that was hidden there during World War II. The boy in this, he's a young boy, but he wants to be a reporter. And so in this, he is starting to try to get he's working for the school newspaper and he's looking for a story and he stumbles upon a conspiracy, or is it? And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. There were a couple of big surprises in here, some twists, one which did not surprise me, one that did. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I don't know if I enjoyed this as much as some of his other books, but I really did still enjoy it. Then I read the graphic novel New Kid by Jerry Craft. And this tells the story of this young man who is starting at a new school. I felt like this was done really well with the art and the storytelling. I liked the story. I really liked the characters, especially Jordan, the main kid. I really liked him and one of his friends that he made. So then I immediately picked up Class Act, which I thought was a sequel to it, but I guess I think it kind of is. It says a companion, so it's basically still the same kids, the same school, but it's focusing more on a different kid. And this one I liked, but I didn't like it as much as the first one. I think that there might be one more and I would be open to reading it, but I liked the first one definitely the most. Then I read another Darren R. Hicks one. This is Tower of the Five Orders. This is the second book in the Shakespeare mysteries. I can't go into this one too much without giving away the first book, but this family owns a publishing company. There is a family member trying to take over the publishing company from the main girl. I don't know how to say her name. Colophon. I have no idea how to pronounce her name. That might be it. That it might be wrong. But her dad is the one in the family that is in charge of the publishing company. And in the first book, they're trying to oust him and get in. And this one is the same thing. They're still trying to oust him and get in. And there's things happening with old manuscripts and trying to discredit things that have been found in the first book. And it definitely builds off of the story right from where it left off in the first book. I didn't feel like this one was as strong as the first one. However, I still thought it was great. And by the time I got to the end, it was really hard to put down. When I reviewed the first one, I talked about how his chapter titles had played into different parts of Shakespeare's plays. And in this one, it's the same thing, just a little bit of a different twist. Each chapter title has a word and then a definition of a word. So for example, chapter 1, it says auspicious, presenting favorable circumstances or showing signs of a favorable outcome. So then at the end of the book, he has the list of all of the different words that were used for the chapter titles. And those chapter titles tied into that chapter in some way. But it tells you which play that word was in. And he lets you know that these are all words that are believed to have originated from Shakespeare. And I thought that was really cool. And so what I have found with his books, a lot with every single one of his books, is that I'm learning things. So in the World War II one, I learned things. In this one, I'm learning things about Shakespeare. And then the other series that I read the second book in this month, I also learned. And so I'm going to talk about that one. This is the Rembrandt Conspiracy, a lost art mystery. This is also book 2. And in this one, there are people trying to steal art and these kids that are involved. And in this one, there are QR codes whenever they talk about a painting or a museum. And I learned about a museum where paintings were stolen from there and they still have not recovered them. And there's a reward and they have empty frames in the museum. So I've learned things about that, but also you have the QR codes so that you can scan them and go look at the art as you're reading. So I feel like every single one of his middle grade books is going to give kids a really good story, but also educate them in something in art, in literature, in history. So I cannot say enough about him as well. Oh, and in the Tower of the Five Orders, also there was some parts in Oxford, and I love Oxford. As anyone who has watched me for a long time knows, Oxford is one of my favorite places on earth. So that was really fun too. Then I had talked about these 2 books that I had picked up kind of from one, I can't even remember who recommended them. It was a part of a group and they recommended the Winterborne Home books. So there is Winterborne Home for Vengeance and Valor. This is the first one. And then for Mayhem and Mystery, that's the second one. These are by Ali Carter. And I picked these up not really knowing very much about them, just hearing really high praise. And I decided I wanted to read them. I am really glad that I didn't look into it too much before I bought these because I liked them so much that I looked up Ali Carter afterward and realized I've read 2 books by her and both of them were 1 stars. I did not like the books I read by her at all. And these I loved. So I don't know if it's just that I like her middle grade writing better than her young adult writing or what. But if you've read anything by her and didn't like it, you might still want to give these a shot. So in this book, this girl is in foster care, and she ends up being taken to this Winterborne home where there are other kids who also are either in foster care or didn't have a family in some way or another. I don't want to give up too much of why all of them are there, because there's different reasons and they have to do with the story. But this first book, as I was reading it, I can't exactly describe why, but one of my absolute favorite movies as a child was Candle Shoe. If you've seen, it's an old Disney movie. It had Jodie Foster. She was a young teen in that. And I loved that movie. I loved everything about it. I still really like that movie. And it reminded me of Candle Shoe. So very different storyline and characters and the reasons that they're all there and everything. There's so much different about it. But for some reason, it reminded me of it. And I think maybe the kids aspect of like the couple of adults and then the kids. But it was just the feel of it. The vibe it gave off was Candle Shoe. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. When I finished the first book, I had a lot of questions that I was hoping would get answered in the second book, and they did for the most part. There were still a few things that I was like, well, what about this? What about that? But the way this ended made me think that there is going to be more. So I hope that there's going to be more and that all of the questions will be wrapped up. And also I would say that they are a little bit more violent than some of the other middle grade books that are similar to this. Not extremely violent, but there definitely is blood. There is a few scenes of fights, sword fighting, things like that. So there is definitely more violence, but I loved it. I thought these were so interesting and so fast paced. I had a really hard time putting either one of them down. So I would highly recommend these. They were clean. They're great. Then I read book 3 in the Restorationist series. This is Beyond the Far Horizon. It might be just a trilogy. I'm not sure if there's going to be any more. The way this ended, it could have been the last one, but there might be more still too. This is a name that I always butcher. It's Carolyn Liloglau. I have zero idea how to say her name, and I haven't heard it spoken by anyone else, so I don't know for sure. This is the book series where there are people who are able to travel into paintings, and they can go into a painting and then they can go from there into a place where there's other paintings, and then so they can just travel from one painting to other paintings to different parts of the world. And there are a group of bad people who are destroying paintings and stealing paintings. And then there's the restorationists who are trying to fix it and to save paintings. Like I said, this is a third book, so I can't give away too much of the story without, spoiling books 1 and 2, but I really enjoy these books. One of the really fun things, right now I'm also reading the first book again with my daughter in homeschool with some art appreciation. So I have all of the artwork that they talk about that she talks about in the books, and I have it in like a slide presentation. So as we're reading it, whenever it talks about a painting, I can put it up on the screen. That has been really fun. So I'll talk more about that probably at my next video for the last half of the month, because we should finish the first book as well. At the end, I even had a couple of times when I teared up and got a little bit emotional about a few things that were happening. And so that's really all I can say, like I said, without spoiling the other books, but I think it's a really good book series. The next one was slightly disappointing, but not completely. This was The Pumpkin Princess and the Buried Castle by Stephen Banbury. I loved The Pumpkin Princess. If you were around in October when I read the first one, The Pumpkin Princess and the Forever Knight, you'll know that it gave me Anne of Green Gables, Anne and Matthew vibes with the main girl and the Pumpkin King. I really loved it. And there were a couple of parts that felt a little bit darker, but to me, they made sense in the scope of the book, and I did really enjoy it. This one, I did not enjoy the story as much. I still thought it was interesting. It was pretty long, and there were times when I was having a hard time picking it back up because I didn't care as much as I did in the first one, which was unfortunate. But I also felt like this one was a lot darker than the first one. So if that's something that you don't want a lot of witchcraft or different things like that, then you probably would want to stay away from it, or just read the first one and then just stay at that one. The ending I thought was interesting, but kind of strange as well. And I wasn't really on board with some of the things at the ending. So again, this one was kind of a middle of the road one for me. I didn't hate it, but it didn't live up to my expectations from the first one, which was disappointing. Then I had a DNF. This was Wrong Way Home by Kate O'Shaughnessy. And this was a Newbery Honor book. It's a mom and a daughter who escape a cult. And I thought this was going to be just right up my alley, super interesting. And it was at first. I liked the beginning. The problem I have with this book, trying not to spoil it, was that I didn't really connect with the characters that well to begin with. I felt like the story was really slow. I felt like the mom wasn't talking to the girl enough about why they were leaving, so the girl just wants to go back. And at the end, the stakes finally got really high, and you realized that this is a dangerous place, but it didn't feel that way for most of the book. So I don't think that the representation of this kind of cult was well done. There are a lot of cults that people wouldn't consider a cult because it's not dangerous and not as dangerous, and you can leave. This felt more like it would have fit into that line, more like a just compound of people that are like-minded getting together, rather than the other kind that are super physically dangerous until the very end. But also, throughout the book, there are a lot of things brought up that they were experiencing, that they did at this cult, and all these different things, and brought out like they were good things, because they're not necessarily bad things. Things with how she eats and just all. I just felt like it wasn't a good representation. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it is because there are cults exactly like that seem really good, and people on the outside think they're really good, and then they're really dangerous. I don't know. So that is a real thing. Maybe I was being too hard on it because I was expecting one thing. I've read a few books about cults, some of them being the Mormon polygamist cults, since of course I am ex-Mormon and live here in Utah, and I see polygamists all the time. A lot of the things I've read have been those groups and more high demand religion type things. So I think I was expecting something a little bit more similar to that. I don't know how to say it any better than that. I think that some people would enjoy this, but I didn't think it was a good cult representation. I didn't think the writing was that good. And then as far as content, I like to make sure I'm telling people when there are things in here that I know that some of you don't read, and there is an LGBT older couple in this. So you'd want to be aware of that. I think this could have been a lot better. And I think that you could have cared more about the characters, and I feel like the stakes could have felt higher at the very beginning rather than saving that for the end. Then I read the book that has been my favorite so far, The Mysterious Magic of Lighthouse Lane. I talked about how I went into a bookstore last month, and the cover of this book caught my eye because of the lighthouse, and I told my daughter, this looks like a Prince Edward Island lighthouse. I opened it up to read and saw that the young girl was going to Prince Edward Island to stay with her grandfather in the summer. And that sold me. I wanted to read it, but I had lower expectations. I felt like because of what I wanted it to be, that maybe it wouldn't be. I loved this book so much. It is not a fast-paced book. It is not some grand adventure like a lot of these books that I love are. It was slower and more internal. This girl has a lot of emotions. She's an empath. She doesn't know that at the beginning. She doesn't know what that is, but she knows that she feels things physically that other people are feeling, and even animals. And she meets a couple of kids on the island, and there's some issues with that. She's staying with the grandpa. He has his own issues. And she does get this camera of her grandmother's, and she starts taking pictures. And when she's developing the pictures, she sees things in them that nobody else does. And it helps her to want to help other people. But then she also has to realize that sometimes helping people is not doing the thing that you think you need to do to help them. And this book I related to a lot because I could relate to a lot of the things she was feeling and thinking. This book made me get teary-eyed so much, especially at the end. I wrote down so many quotes from it. It was just such a breath of fresh air. I felt like I was reading something so wholesome and beautiful in a way that I haven't for a while. I also loved the Prince Edward Island location and the Anne of Green Gables references, obviously, since Anne of Green Gables is my favorite book, and I've been to Prince Edward Island a few times and love it so much. So that was something I really appreciated, and it didn't feel gratuitous. It didn't feel like, oh, I'm just doing this to cater to the Anne of Green Gables and Prince Edward Island lovers. It felt very organic to the story. It just felt natural. I loved it so much. So some of the quotes I wrote down, I guess that's the one good part about feeling everything. The good things get into. When you feel everything, everyone's feelings feel like your problem. Love someone so much that you know their face with your eyes closed. I could go on probably for a very long time about parts in this book and how they made me feel, and how I think that they would make children that maybe do have big emotions feel. I highly recommend. This was a 5-star for me. I absolutely loved it. And I did see that she has a few other books, so I'm going to try those out very soon. And then I read Island of Stars, or I started to read Island of Stars by Carrie Brownell. I love the cover. The premise sounds interesting to me. Some kids that go to this island and are exploring it. I can't say that it's a bad book. I did not like the writing style. I had a really hard time getting into it. I only gave it a few chapters, then I skipped to the end to see what happened, to see if I would like the writing style better as it went along. I didn't. I just didn't like the way it was written. I felt like it was dry. I had my daughter pick it up afterward and give me her opinion on it, and she just read the first little bit as well and said that she felt like it was definitely telling, not showing. I feel like maybe it was going for written in an old-fashioned way, like some of the children's books that are classics that are written more formally, maybe. And so that's kind of what it felt like to me. It felt very formal in its writing, and some people will love that, some people won't. I sometimes do, but in this one I just didn't feel like it fit, and I just didn't really care. So I DNF'd that one, and that is where I am right now. I am in the middle of a couple of books that I think I'm going to finish in the next few days, and then I have a bunch of other ones I'm hoping to get to. So I will come back with a part 2, anything else that I am able to read in March.